You are sitting in your car, the window is rolled down, and a police officer is standing right there leaning in slightly with a flashlight and a notepad. Your heart is hammering against your ribs like a trapped bird. The officer asks a simple conversational question like, "So, where are you headed tonight?" A war breaks out inside your brain. One side of you, the social side, wants to be polite, helpful, and chatty to de-escalate the tension. But the other side, the side that knows the law, is screaming at you to keep your mouth shut. Most people believe that if they just stay silent, they will look guilty, get arrested immediately, or make the officers so angry that things will take a turn for the worse. But what actually happens biologically, legally, and psychologically if you choose to exercise your absolute right to remain silent during a police stop? As a lawyer, I can tell you that the reality is far more complex than what you see on television. Staying silent isn't just about refusing to talk. It is a tactical legal maneuver that triggers a massive shift in how the entire justice system has to treat you. Today we are breaking down the play-by-play of a silent encounter, from the chemical shifts in your bloodstream to the specific legal protections that lock into place the moment you stop talking. To understand the power of silence, we first have to look at the biology of a police stop. When those lights go on, your body triggers a massive release of adrenaline and cortisol. This is the fight or flight response. In this state, your brain undergoes a process called cortical inhibition. Essentially, the logical, reasoning part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, takes a backseat to the amygdala, which is focused purely on survival. This is why people who are completely innocent often stumble over their words, forget their own zip code, or give conflicting accounts of where they were 10 minutes ago. If you talk while in this biological state, you are providing evidence that is filtered through a compromised brain. By staying silent, you are essentially hitting the pause button on your own biology, preventing yourself from making the high-speed verbal errors that prosecutors love to use in court. Now let's talk about the legal mechanics. When you remain silent, you are invoking the Fifth Amendment of the United States Constitution. But here is the first major revealed truth that shocks most people. You cannot just be silent. In 2013, the Supreme Court ruled in a case called Salinas versus Texas that you must actually speak up to remain silent. If you just stare at the officer without saying anything, that silence itself can sometimes be used against you as evidence of a suspicious reaction. To get the full protection of the law, you have to say the magic words, something like, "Officer, I am choosing to remain silent, and I want to speak with an attorney." The second those words leave your mouth, a legal shield is erected. What happens to the officer in that moment? Their job just got a lot harder. Most police investigations rely heavily on self-incrimination. They are looking for you to admit you were speeding, to admit you had a drink, or to give them reasonable suspicion to search your car. When you stay silent, you are essentially cutting off their primary source of information. You are forcing them to rely on objective evidence. This means they have to look at their radar gun, their dashcam footage, or physical clues. From a lawyer's perspective, objective evidence is much easier to challenge in court than a statement that came out of your own mouth. But what about the psychological pressure? This is where the encounter gets intense. Police officers are trained in interrogation psychology. They know that humans are socially conditioned to fill silence. If they ask you a question and you don't answer, they might just stand there and stare at you. They might say things like, "If you don't talk to me, I can't help you," or "Only guilty people stay quiet." This is a tactic designed to trigger your compliance reflex. They are trying to make the silence feel so uncomfortable that you will say anything just to break the tension. If you survive that initial silence battle, you have already won the most important part of the encounter. You have demonstrated that you are legally literate and that you cannot be easily manipulated. There is a recent scientific discovery in the field of behavioral forensics that explains why this is so effective. It's called the interrogator's fallacy. It turns out that when an officer is talking to someone who is chatty and helpful, the officer's brain starts to look for clues of deception in every word. But when someone is silent and calm, the officer is forced to shift into a procedural mindset. They stop looking for lies and start looking for legal cause. You are literally changing the way the officer's brain is processing the stop. You are moving yourself from the category of suspect to be tricked into the category of citizen to be processed. But let's get into the big one, the arrest. Many people ask me, won't they just arrest me if I don't talk? Here is the reality. An officer needs probable cause to arrest you. They cannot arrest you simply because you exercised a constitutional right. In fact, if an officer arrests you specifically because you stayed silent, that arrest is likely illegal, and any evidence they find afterward could be thrown out of court. This is called the fruit of the poisonous tree doctrine. By staying silent, you are setting a legal trap for an overzealous officer. If they lose their temper and arrest you without a real reason, your silence becomes the very thing that gets your case dismissed later. Let's look at the timeline of a silent stop. In the first 60 seconds, the officer is assessing your threat level. Keep your hands on the steering wheel. Be physically compliant, and provide your license and registration. This shows you are not a physical threat. In the next 2 minutes, the questioning phase begins. This is where you invoke your right. Officer, I'm not answering questions. I'm remaining silent. For the next 5 to 10 minutes, the officer will likely try different angles. They might ask about the smell in the car, or your destination, or your background. If you remain consistent in your silence, the officer eventually realizes that information gathering is over. They then have to make a choice: write the ticket and let you go, or find a legal reason to detain you further. When residents remain silent and polite, the duration of the stop is actually shorter on average. Why? Because there is nothing to debate. When you start explaining and arguing, the stop drags on, giving the officer more time to observe things that might give them a reason to search your car. Silence is a time compressor. It forces the officer to get to the point. Wait, what about searching the car? This is the most dangerous part of a stop. An officer might say, well, since you're not talking, you won't mind if I take a look in the trunk, right? This is a consent trap. Biologically, you are exhausted by this point. The stress of the silence is wearing you down. You might think, if I just let him look, he'll see I'm clean and let me go. Do not do this. Silence must be paired with a refusal of consent. You say, I do not consent to any searches. If they search anyway, they have to prove in court that they had probable cause. If you said yes, they don't have to prove anything. Your silence and your refusal of consent work together like a lock and a key. There is a cognitive bias called confirmation bias that we need to discuss. If an officer thinks you look suspicious, they will interpret your chatty, nervous behavior as guilt. But if you are silent, they have no behavioral data to feed their bias. You become a blank slate. This is incredibly frustrating for an investigator, but it is incredibly protective for a citizen. You are essentially starving the officer's subconscious bias of the fuel it needs to justify an arrest. Let's talk about the long-term impact of staying silent. If you end up in court, the record of that stop is everything. If the body cam shows you being polite, providing your documents and then calmly stating you are remaining silent, you look like a model citizen. You look like someone who knows their rights and respects the law. But if that same body cam shows you rambling, making excuses, or getting angry, the jury will see you as unreliable. Silence is dignity insurance. It ensures that your courtroom persona is not destroyed by your roadside stress. There is a fascinating study in neurolaw that looked at false confessions during roadside stops. It turns out that people often confess to minor crimes they didn't commit just to get the officer to like them or to speed up the process. This is called compliance gaining. By staying silent, you are protecting your future self from a false confession that could haunt you for the rest of your life. Your brain is not a reliable witness when it is under the stress of a police flashlight. Silence is the only fail-safe. But what if you're innocent? This is the most common pushback I get. But I didn't do anything. Why shouldn't I just tell them that? Here is the lawyer's secret. Innocence is not a shield. History is full of innocent people who talk their way into a conviction. You might say you were at the grocery store at 8 o'clock, but you were actually there at 8:30. If the police have a video of a crime at 8 o'clock and you just lied about your whereabouts even by mistake, you are now the primary suspect. If you had stayed silent, you wouldn't have provided that false alibi that made you look guilty. Silence protects the innocent more than anyone else, because it prevents accidental lies. Let's look at the interstate differences. In some stop and identify states, you are legally required to give your name if you are being lawfully detained. Staying silent about your identity in those states can get you arrested for obstruction, but identity is not interrogation. You can give your name and then immediately return to silence. My name is John Doe, and I am now invoking my right to remain silent. This hybrid approach fulfills your legal obligations while maintaining your constitutional protections. The recent scientific discovery of stress-induced amnesia is vital here. When you are in a police stop, your brain's hippocampus, the part that records memories, can literally glitch. You might remember the light was green when it was actually yellow. If you say it was green, and the dashcam shows it was yellow, you are now a deceptive person in the eyes of the law. Silence is the recognition that your own memory is a flawed witness in the moments following a high-stress event. What happens behind the scenes after a silent stop? The officer goes back to their car to write their report. If you were silent, that report is usually very short. Subject provided documents, invoked the Fifth Amendment, no further information gathered. That is a beautiful report for a defense attorney to see. It gives the prosecutor nothing to work with. It is a dead end for the investigation. But if that report is 10 pages long because of everything you said, it is a roadmap for a conviction. Let's talk about passengers. If you are a passenger in a car that gets pulled over, do you have to talk? Generally, the answer is no. You have the same right to silence as the driver. In fact, many people have been arrested because they tried to help their friend by talking to the officer, only to accidentally provide evidence that got both of them in trouble. The golden rule of the car is one person talks to provide documents, and everyone else stays silent. This prevents inconsistent statements between the driver and the passenger, which is one of the top ways officers justify searching a vehicle. There is a social pressure to be a good citizen. We are taught that good people cooperate with the police. But cooperation is not the same as conversion. You can be a cooperative citizen by being polite, following physical directions and not resisting, while still being a silent citizen. Real good citizenship is about upholding the Constitution. When you use your Fifth Amendment rights, you are exercising the very freedom that generations have fought for. You are being a patriot of privacy. What about the phone? If an officer asks to see your phone, or asks for the passcode, staying silent is your digital shield. Your phone contains your life code. They almost always need a warrant to look inside. If you stay silent and don't give up that code, you are protecting not just yourself, but everyone you have ever messaged or emailed. The right to silence extends to your digits and your data. Consider the physics of an encounter. Every word you say is energy you are giving to the investigation. The more energy you provide, the faster the investigation moves. By staying silent, you are starving the investigation of energy. You are making the process slow and heavy. Most officers would rather move on to someone who is easier to deal with, someone who will talk and provide easy evidence. Silence makes you a hard target. There is a legal discovery called the right to be left alone. While not explicitly in the Constitution, it is the spirit behind the Fourth and Fifth Amendments. Staying silent is the ultimate expression of this right. It is you saying, I am a sovereign individual, and I do not owe the government an explanation for my existence or my movements. You are asserting your agency. You are moving from a subject of the state to a citizen of the state. Does silence ever look bad? To the officer on the scene? Maybe. To a jury? Not if it's done correctly. A skilled lawyer can explain to a jury that their client stayed silent because they respected the law and understood the high-stress environment. We can frame your silence as an act of prudence rather than guilt. In fact, many jurors find it impressive when someone has the grit to stay quiet under pressure. It suggests a level of character that guilty people rarely have. Let's talk about tone. If you stay silent with a smirk or a sarcastic comment, you are losing the battle. The silent treatment should be professional. Think of yourself as a senior executive in a high-level meeting. You are calm, you are measured, and you are choosing your words with extreme care. This aura of professionalism makes it very difficult for an officer to justify treated you roughly. It's hard to be aggressive towards someone who is being perfectly calm and silent. Recent neurological studies on police-citizen interactions show that verbal conflict is what usually leads to a use of force incident. When the conversation escalates into an argument, the arousal levels of both the citizen and the officer spike to dangerous levels. Silence breaks the circuit. It prevents the escalation ladder from being built. It is the ultimate safety tool. If you aren't talking back, there is no contempt of cop trigger that leads to a physical struggle. What about after the stop? If you were silent and you still got a ticket or got arrested, what do you do next? You continue to stay silent. In the patrol car, in the booking station, in the cell. Every silent minute is a winning minute for your legal case. Many people break once they get into the police car because they think the recording is off. It's not. The car is a moving recording studio. Stay silent until you are sitting in a private room with your attorney. That is the only safe zone. The lawyer's mantra is anything you say can and will be used against you. Notice it doesn't say anything you say will be used to help you. The system is asymmetrical. It is designed to filter for guilt. By staying silent, you are refusing to be filtered. You are maintaining your wholeness as a legal entity. You are not providing the fragments of speech that can be reassembled into a narrative of guilt. Let's look at the global context. In many countries, you don't have a right to silence, or if you use it, it can be used directly as evidence of guilt. We are incredibly lucky in the United States to have a robust Fifth Amendment. Using it is not just a self-defense tactic. It is an act of civic participation. You are kept safe by the very rights you activate during a stop. What happens if you slip up? If you've been silent for 10 minutes and then you accidentally answer a question, don't panic. You can re-invoke your right at any time. Officer, I realized I'm talking again. I am re-invoking my right to remain silent and I want my lawyer. It's never too late to stop talking. The law allows you to change your mind and shut the door even if you already let a few words out. Let's discuss the psychological aftermath. Staying silent is hard. You will feel a crash after the stop is over. The adrenaline dump will leave you shaking and exhausted. This is normal. It is the price of protection. But that shaking is much better than the sinking feeling of knowing you just admitted to a crime or gave away your rights. Take a deep breath. Realize you did the right thing. And call your lawyer to report the encounter while the details are still fresh in your mind. The revealed truth of a police stop is that it is a legal interaction, disguised as a social interaction. The officer might be perfectly nice. They might even joke with you, but they are still on duty. They are still working. By staying silent, you are matching their professional energy. You are recognizing that this is business, not pleasure. This leveling of the energy is what keeps you in control. In the end, what happens if you stay silent during a police stop? You seal the record. You protect your biology. You empower your lawyer, and you uphold the Constitution. You turn a chaotic event into a controlled event. You might still get that speeding ticket, but you won't get the incident that changes your life forever. Silence is your superpower. It is the invisible armor you carry with you every time you get behind the wheel. As a lawyer, my biggest frustration is seeing a winnable case destroyed by a pointless conversation. Don't let that be you. Trust the power of the pause. Trust the shield of the fifth. And trust that nothing you say is ever better for you than saying nothing at all. The awakening of your legal rights happens the moment you realize that your voice is a weapon that can be turned against you. So keep it holstered. The big one, the major legal victory, is often won on the side of a road, 3 months before the court date, by a person who had the grit to stay silent while their heart was pounding. That is the real world of police law. It's not about shouting in a courtroom, it's about shirking the conversation at the window. It's about being the silent citizen in a noisy world. Stay curious about your rights. Read the case law. Understand the mechanics. The more you know, the less you fear the blue lights. Silence is not fear. Silence is knowledge, and knowledge is the ultimate defense. Whatever happens at your next stop, remember the countdown to your freedom starts with the last word. You don't say. Keep your documents ready, keep your hands visible, and keep your mouth shut. That is the lawyer's roadmap to surviving any police encounter. It has worked for over 200 years, and it will work for you. The truth is that the system cannot function without your participation. You are withholding your consent to be processed. You are standing tall in your constitutional truth, and that is a discovery that will leave every prosecutor speechless. The silent revolution of legal individual is happening every day. Be a part of it. Use your rights, protect your future, and stay safe out there. The road is long, but with silence as your navigator, you will always find your way home to justice. That is the final word on the silent stop. And as the lights fade in your rearview mirror, you can drive away knowing that you did exactly what was required to keep your story in your own hands. That is the power, that is the law, and that is the victory.